Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I am a DIY maker and creator and blogger. And today I'm going to show you guys how to make some really fun statement hair clips using the brand new FIMO Leather Effect Clay. So before we get started, I'm going to kind of go over some things that make FIMO unique, and we're going to walk through everything that you need to know to successfully make your first clay project, whether or not you use the FIMO soft clay, FIMO Leather Effect like we're going to use today, or another type of FIMO. So we're going to go over kind of the basics, and at any point, if you guys have any questions, we do have the chat over there. You can click on the bottom of the screen and type in a question, and the FIMO team or myself will try and answer it to the best of our abilities. And let's go ahead and get started. So I know some of you guys, some people messaged me and said they wanted to grab their supplies and follow along, and others of you may just be watching and want to create later tonight or this weekend and get your supplies later, so that's no problem. So if you are working hands-on as I'm working, feel free to ask a specific question if you're encountering a problem or have a question about a specific technique. But we'll go ahead and get started now. So the first thing I wanted to intro and talk to about is the FIMO Leather Effect Clay. So you may be really familiar with polymer clay, or it might be something new that you have never worked with. But what it is it's a plastic-based clay that you can bake in your home oven or toaster oven. And what makes it really unique with the leather effect is that it has a texture. So typically polymer clay has a smooth texture, and it can be made even smoother by polishing and sanding. But this clay is really unique in that, I'm gonna show you guys a few pieces that I have here, and I'll hold it up here. You guys can see that. This clay has the effect or the texture of real leather. I've never seen anything like it. It was really neat when I first learned about it because I love working with leather, but this is actually kind of brings a whole new dimension into clay making, which is really cool. So I'm going to kind of go over some properties of it and as we work with it. So you guys can see I have a ton of colors over here. The new FIMO Leather Effect Clay comes in 12 different colors. And you can use them all as is, which is what we're going to do to start, but you can also combine them as you would any other polymer clay to make your own marbled effects, which I have an example here, and we're going to go over that as well. Or you can blend them to make your own custom color blends, which is what I did here. So this is not a pre-made color, but I combined two colors to make this color. So the possibilities are absolutely endless. So if you are new to using polymer clay and FIMO leather effect, I suggest grabbing a couple colors to get started. Maybe use your favorite colors. If you always use neutrals and like neutral accessories, maybe opt for something like that. If you like something brighter, maybe grab a brighter color and also get black and white so you can lighten it and darken it and kind of build up from there. You don't need to get all these things to start, although it is so much fun having this entire color palette to get started. So what we're going to kind of go over first is there's two methods on rolling out the clay. So it's kind of like when you're baking something and baking like cut out cookies, you're going to knead the clay and then roll it out. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start by opening up one of my little packs of clay. And one thing that's really neat about FIMO Leather Effect and all the FIMO clays is that it's divided into 8 sections, kind of little ridges here, and that's just a really helpful way to know how much clay you're going to use. So for instance, if you're going to make a really big project and you want to repeat it later, you know, okay, I used 3 segments out of the 8 for this one project, and then I can go back. Or it's also helpful for color mixing. You can kind of measure out things easily and know exactly how much you're going to use. So I'm going to start today with 3 segments, and I'm going to show you guys this tool that I'm using. I'm going to be using a lot. You can kind of see here, it looks almost like a spatula or scraper that you would use in the kitchen for picking up chopped veggies, but this is made by FIMO. It's specifically used for clay, and there's a couple different options for that. Let me see, I have one over here. Oh, I think it got moved, but they also have a longer one that it looks more like a ruler. Both of these are going to be used time and time again. So if you're starting out and you're not sure exactly what tools you should invest in and what you shouldn't, getting a scraper is like one of the most important tools, because when you roll out your clay, it can be a little bit delicate. And when you pick it up, it might stretch or get a little wonky. This scraper tool is going to be really helpful for releasing the clay from your cutting surface. So before we get started, another kind of tip that is so helpful is you want to keep a pack of baby wipes or alcohol wipes handy as you work. Some of the colors I found, especially the blue and teal and black and brown colors, are really saturated with pigment. So as you're working, you might see some of the pigments either all over your hand or on the working surface. And then if you go to work on another color, like for instance, white or the light yellow, that might pick up the dyes from the other color. So what I like to do is make sure my hands are all nice and clean my surface between working with colors, especially colors that are really different in color and value. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and I'm going to just cut up, this is 3 segments. I'm just going to manipulate it with my hands. And as you do this, you can kind of just use your thumbs to knead it. Like I said, just like you're making some cookies or biscuits or something, you're just going to work with it. And you'll notice right away, this clay is really soft. It's really nice and easy to work with. You don't really have to like put too much energy and effort into working with it. It's really pliable as you get started. But what makes this clay really unique is going to be the leather effect. So as I work with it, you can kind of see over here, you see a little bit of texture. But if you really want to bring out that leather texture, what you do is after you roll it, you want to stretch it a little bit. So there's 2 methods to roll out the clay. This is a clear acrylic ruler made by FIMO, and this is a wonderful tool. If you've made cutout cookies or something like that in the kitchen, same kind of thing like a rolling pin, you're going to use this to press on the clay and roll it out into a flat surface. If you worked with clay before, or maybe you're like, oh, I'm committed to this, like this is so much fun, I love working with this. The one tool that I absolutely think is invaluable is going to be the FIMO clay machine. And it looks kind of crazy and maybe a little intimidating, but what's unique about the clay machine is it's kind of like a pasta press. You put the clay in it, you crank it, and then it magically rolls it out. It's a pretty affordable tool. You attach it to the table so it's nice and sturdy, and I absolutely love it. So for this workshop, I'm going to be leaning on using the clay machine just because of time. It kind of works a little bit quicker, but everything that I make with the clay machine, you could absolutely use the acrylic ruler as well. One tip that if you do have an acrylic ruler or are going to use this method is a baking trick, is you want to put rubber bands on either end of the roller. Like if you wrap one 3 times around here, put one 3 times around here, and that will help you get a nice even thickness as you roll. That's something that's going to be unique with the clay machine, is that it's going to have a really smooth, even thickness that can be a little bit more difficult with the acrylic ruler. So putting those rubber bands on either side will definitely help that. So I just rolled this out, and what I want to show you guys over here is you can see the texture. But if I give it a gentle little tug before I start cutting it out or doing anything with it, you'll notice that it has this subtle texture. So the more that you pull it, that's really gonna bring out the leather effect. So depending on the look that you want before you continue making any of your accessories or whatever you're gonna make with your clay, you wanna decide if you want to have it more smooth and just a subtle texture, or if you really want to have that faux leather texture, go ahead and give it a gentle little tug. You want to be mindful of it though and not give it too much of a tug, because it will, I rolled this one out a little bit thin, so I did tear it there. But it's very forgiving in that I could just fold it, use my roller again, or in this case, I'm just going to fold it again and run it back through my clay machine. So today, what we're going to focus on is making statement hair clips. And for hair clips, I like to have a thickness of about 1/8 of an inch or a little bit thinner. If you're using a clay machine, that's setting 1 for the thickest, about 1/8 of an inch, and then 2. What I just used is setting 2. It's a little bit thinner. Anything thinner for this, might not have enough stability when you're having it in your hair, especially like I have really thick hair and I want it to have a little bit more strength. So I'm going to show you guys before we proceed, I'm going to show you guys some examples of what I've created, and then we're going to kind of walk backwards and go through each of those things. So one thing that is really unique to the leather effect clay is not just the texture, but also that after you bake it, it's flexible. So I mentioned before, polymer clay you bake in your home toaster oven or oven, and it's just 30 minutes. And after it's cool, if you've worked with polymer clay before in other FIMO clays, you'll notice it's really rigid. One thing that's really fun about this is it's totally flexible after it's baked, which means you can make so many different things with it. Another unique feature with the FIMO Leather Effect is after it's baked, you can use just regular old scissors. These are just like regular fiskars, and you can cut it. You can cut it straight, which is really helpful if you use a cutter or another tool and maybe your curves are a little wonky and you want to straighten it out. You can just use scissors to snip it and keep working. Or you can use scissors to cut out a totally unique shape after it's baked. So that's something that's really unique that I've never seen in other clays before, and it lends itself to being the perfect material for this particular project because we're going to be using different hair barrettes and attaching our clay pieces, our leather effect clay pieces, onto metal hair clips. So if you take a look over here, these are all metal hair findings that I've found at Michael's. These are my favorite ones. I've tried a bunch of them. They have even a bigger selection online if you want to check that out. And these are, we're going to start with these. These are little alligator clips. You can find these in store. And I absolutely love working with these. They have a slight curve. You'll notice kind of right there. But that's no problem when we're baking this clay because since the FIMO Leather Effect is flexible, we don't even have to worry about molding our creations into that shape before we bake them because we'll be able to glue it on with no problem. They also sell these little ribbon covered ones, which are great for toddlers. I try and put these in my daughter's hair, but they only last like 30 seconds. But these are really nice and comfy for little kids, or if you just don't want the little alligator teeth in your hair, if you have finer hair, these work great. These are available on Michael's online. And then this is a more traditional barrette. I love these gigantic ones. When I wear my hair half up, they hold a lot of hair. This is a little multi-pack that I picked up at my local Michael's that has various sizes. So before you start, you just want to figure out what kind you want to work with. As a side note, you can also add these little shapes that we're creating onto bobby pins, the ones that are kind of flexible, that are teardrop shape. I know Michael's has a few more of those on their website as well. So it kind of just depends on what your preference. But the good news is that you can make a ton of these shapes, and then later, if you want to mix and match and add them to your favorite type of hair hardware. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with these. And just to note that all these things that I found at Michael's are nickel free. If you have a nickel allergy like me, that's super helpful as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I rolled out this first 3 segments of white clay. What I'm going to do now is kind of go over a little bit of color mixing before we jump into cutting it out. So I used white, and this is a corally bright color called Watermelon that looks so summery and perfect as is. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a few marbling techniques and then also blending further. So I'm going to use 2 segments of this color using my scraper to cut it, blend it over here. If you don't use all your leather effect on one shot, you don't have to worry about it drying out or hardening as it would be in the oven or anything like that. The biggest thing to note is you want to prevent dust from getting in here. So you can keep it in the little package that it came in. It's actually slightly sticky at the top, so you can seal it up there. But then I like to then take these, wrap them in plastic, and put them in a storage container with all my other kind of remnant pieces. But you don't have to worry about it drying out, especially if it's brand new. You can have some that you know, that's years old that it's gonna keep, which is really nice. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna just knead this other color. And I like to just roll it with my hands and kind of make a noodle here. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the white one here. Move that over here. And I guess do as I say, not as I do. I forgot to clean it after working with black this morning, and you can kind of see that I did pick up some clay here. If I don't want that in my final piece, I'm just gonna use this cutter to cut that segment off. And does anyone have any questions as we're kind of working on this before we jump into this? Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these two segments and twist them together, almost like a rope. Once I've gotten them all twisted, I'm gonna do it again. And there's really, what I love about this is there's really no exact science or right or wrong way to do this. You'll kind of, as you work with the clay more, and especially if you're doing any type of marbling or color mixing, you'll kind of get to a rhythm and know like, oh, okay, I like to twist it twice and leave it more color blocked and larger color segments, or you can keep manipulating further to have a more blended look. So after I twisted it, I'm gonna fold it in half and stick it in my clay machine. If you're using the acrylic roller, you can go ahead and roll it out now. And you can kind of see over here that after I rolled it out, it has like a zebra stripe, which I think is really cool. And if you want, you can go ahead and we'll cut out there, or to show you guys, I'm just gonna work with it a little bit more and blend it a little bit more to show you how I created the effect on this one.
Hey, Sarah, do you roll? Do you roll after you use the machine, or in cooperation with the machine?
In cooperation with. Because I'm trying to, like, it was kind of color blocked, so I wanted it to have a little bit more of a swirled look, so I'm rolling it out with my hands and twisting it. That's one thing to get that marbled effect that I found is you can't really get that twist with using the machine without actually rolling it into the rope kind of shape. But you'll find as you use it that kind of get a rhythm of what look you want. So you can see, since I twisted it again, you'll see these diagonal lines here, which I think is really beautiful. So I'm gonna go ahead and roll with this and talk about using the cutters, and then we'll blend it further to make a solid color in just a little bit.
Perfect. And what setting do you set for the machine? Is it an 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, or?
They're actually numbered 1 through, I believe, 9, 1 being the thickest. I like to start out at 1 as I'm working, which is about 1/8 of an inch, and then it goes smaller from there. So what I'm using, and I can kind of show you guys an example, for the majority of the pieces that I've created here, these are all finished hair clips. These were all done at the number 2 setting, which is a little bit thinner than 1/8 of an inch. The only kind of the big difference is if you're planning on the finished piece having, like, bending it. For instance, I used a little wooden stir stick to create this hair clip. And the finished product is gonna have bend to it. It's gonna hold hair through it. So I want the clay to be thinner, on the thinner end for this than I would for this finished layered piece. This one was about 1/8 of an inch on the 1 setting on the clay machine, because these are just stacked pieces that are glued to the barrette. But what I found with the clay is it is flexible, but it's not, and it's very durable. If it's really thick, you may see some cracking where it's bent. So I prefer to use it a little bit thinner if my finished product is going to be on a significant curve like this shape is. So this one is on the 2 setting, which is a little bit thinner than 1/8 of an inch. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you guys, and you can see over here, this really fun assortment of cutters. So the new collection that's available at Michael's, my friend Rachel and I created all these really fun shapes that you can use with your FIMO clay. They are really fun, and there's shapes for every style or preference or design that you want. Each pack, I think, has 9 to 12 cutters in it. So with one pack, you can create so many different shapes. Here, I believe I have all of them out. You don't need those to get started. Just pick the shapes that you're drawn to. There's so many things you can do with just a couple basic shapes. And I like to use these shape cutters before I bake the clay to cut out my shapes. I showed you guys before that you can use scissors after, but one thing about using scissors to cut out shapes with your clay is that you will waste some clay after it's baked. If you're gonna do it beforehand with your cutters, you can really fine tune what you wanna create and also then keep using the excess clay. So what I'm gonna show you guys right here is I'm gonna grab a circle cutter, which I think is, if you're not sure what shapes to start, the circle cutters and the square cutters are super helpful, because from here, I created shapes like this. This is the oval one, but you can subtract to create a cutout as well with the same exact set. This is the oval set, here's the circle set. So it's really endless when you start. When you cut out your clay, you want to make sure on the cutters, there's a thicker edge. That's the top. You don't want to actually cut your clay with that. You're going to want to use the thinner edge. And this one, I can tell that, I think I used this one to create the black barrette the other day. So I'm going to wipe it down to remove any of the other clay. And then I'm just going to position it in the clay where I want, press down. And one thing I think I forgot to mention is you might see that I'm working on a marble slab. This is just something I've had for probably 10 years that I used to use for other DIY projects and more for photo styling. It works great, but the biggest thing is you want a smooth, non-porous surface to get started. So if you check out FIMO in your local Michael's, they do sell a 12 by 12 inch acrylic board, which I have one of those. I think I have it over there. That's a great starting point because it's really, you don't need a ton of space to get started. I chose to use this today because it's not as reflective, so that way you guys can see this a little bit better. But anything that's smooth and non-porous, so if you want to go to your local home improvement store, you can go grab a large tile. That works great as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut out a few shapes, and I'm positioning the cutter where I really like the coloring of this. And then I'm not going to use all of it now, but I'm going to just go ahead and use my scraper tool to kind of help me lift it up and peel away the excess clay, the negative space here. And if it's a little sticky, that's okay. I'm going to grab this clay and set it over here. We'll work with that in just a little bit. But this is where this tool comes in so much use, is it makes it really helpful for scraping up the clay. Because if I just grabbed it, which sometimes I kind of had to get in the practice of using this when I first started working with clay, if you grab it with just your hands, you may pull it and distort the shape a little bit. So this is where this tool is one of its awesome uses. So after I cut this out, you'll notice that the edges might look a little fuzzy. Before I bake that, the easiest fix for that is just using your finger to smooth it out. And what I love about the leather effect is because the clay has some texture to it, my fingerprints aren't really going to get in there and affect the look of it because it already has some texture. So you can really easily go in here and smooth it out. And then once, for instance, if we wanted to just go ahead and bake this, what we would do is we would transfer this over to a baking sheet. I like to use a baking sheet that's lined with parchment paper. This is just a stainless steel, I believe, or aluminum baking sheet. And I just use my cutter to transfer my piece onto my sheet, make sure it's nice and flat, and then that would be ready to bake. I like to fill up my whole tray, get them all made and bake them all at once. So I just like to keep this aside as I'm working and keep transferring things over. One little tip when you're working with FIMO is you can also use, I know a lot of people like to use like aluminum foil or something. One thing when you use aluminum foil as opposed to parchment paper is when your baked pieces will have a little bit of shine wherever they're touching on the back, wherever they're touching the aluminum foil on the pan. So I really prefer to use the parchment paper because I have found that they look really even on both sides when I bake with the parchment paper. So one thing I wanted to show you guys about using, just like starting with a circle cutter, is we could just use our scraper then to divide these into semicircles right there.
Sarah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you avoid fingerprints on the clay?
That's a great question. I found that with the leather effect in particular, it really doesn't hold fingerprints. It's very forgiving in that way. But if you are interested, part of the collection, we also have FIMO Soft Clay available at Michael's, and I believe FIMO Professional as well. That's the one that is more smooth and does hold fingerprints a little bit more. One thing that's really neat and the easiest way I found to remove them is actually using sandpaper. So I'll have it over here. Sometimes, especially like how I showed you guys how to smooth out the edges after we cut it out, if you wanted to just bake that and you realize, oh wait, I missed a little piece and it's a little fuzzy here, or maybe a fingerprint or a speck of dust, using sandpaper is the easiest way to remove those. These are made by FIMO. I actually cut this one in half. That's why you'll see that here. They come in a pack of three different grits, from very fine to ultra fine. And these work best. I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but no problem. I want to show you guys this. This is so important. I'm going to grab a finished piece that I have here. Here's like a little black teardrop that I made. It works best when you actually use the sandpaper in water, which seems kind of strange and counterintuitive. And you're like, wait, what? But that helps reduce the dust. And these are kind of sandpaper on sponge sheets. So I just go in here and sand away, and it smooths it out so well. And then the water, and you can even dip it in water. You just want to make sure that your pieces are totally dry before you use any type of adhesive on metal or anything else. So you can really go in here and polish it. And it's like magic how it gets rid of those little edges, and it works so well. So that's kind of why I had this little bowl of water here with these as well. So these, I believe, are available in Michael's online and in store with the FIMO assortment. I saw them at my store the other day. And again, if you're interested in jumping into FIMO and doing a lot with it, I'd recommend grabbing a pack of those, because you can cut them down. If you're working with a lot of small pieces, you might even want to cut it into quarters, and they'll last you a long time and really get your pieces nice and clean. And that same goes with the other types of FIMO as well, not just leather effects. Although, like I said before, the FIMO leather effect is very forgiving and doesn't hold fingerprints quite as much as some of the other ones. So I'm gonna go ahead and I cut these shapes into half circles, and I would just transfer these over to my baking sheet, which I have in my desk over here. But what I wanna show you guys next, I'm gonna put these aside because I have some already baked over here. But what I want to show you guys is what we can do with the excess. So this was the marbled clay that I had, but I'm just going to take the excess and blend it all together to create a solid unanimous color. So this is where, when you find FIMO Leather Effect, if there's a color that you have in mind that you want and you need to, you're like, well, I had a color in mind, like I wanted this blush pink, but I don't see it available. So you can easily make it. So you can use the roller, keep rolling, kneading and rolling, kneading and rolling, or I'm just gonna use the clay machine. Move that out of the way. And you'll notice every time I use it, the two colors are gonna be a little bit more blended each time. So I'm just folding it in half, and like a sandwich, and then fold it again. And that's one thing you wanna be mindful of, is because it's made to be packable, the little handle just rests in there. So you want to not be too excited about it so it goes flying like it did for me. So I'm just going to fold it in half and roll it back through. And you do this, I'd say maybe about 10 times or so until the clay is fully blended into whatever effect you like, because I think this is really a beautiful color where it has some kind of depth and variety in the coloring. I think is really great. If you are looking for a solid color, keep on going. And it's really unlimited what colors you can create and blend together. You can really create any color palette that you want with just a few colors, which is really amazing. One trick that I like to do is if you are blending a particular color and you absolutely love it and you want to go make it in a month or so and you're like, wait, how did I do that? I like to bake a little piece, cut it in like a rectangle or a little scrap, and then write down with Sharpie what colors I used to make it. Like you could even write down, like this one was 3 segments white, 2 of the watermelon, and write it on your little clay piece. So that way you remember exactly how you do it. Because sometimes you're like, wait, how did I do it? Especially if you use a bunch of colors. So I'm just gonna keep going here. And please let me know if you guys have any questions as I'm blending this. We're almost there. All right, and you'll see that it's getting really nice and solid. And again, you can use the acrylic ruler to do this as well. But you'll find that using this is a lot of fun. Okay, so I'm gonna give it one more pass through here. And you can kind of see now my marbled color, which once looked like this, is now a solid light pink. And if this color wasn't quite right, if you wanted it lighter or darker, you could then keep mixing. It's real, you can keep on going with it because it's not going to dry out as you work with it. So a couple of tips that I wanted to show you guys, tips and tricks here. I'm going to wipe this off because clay does get built up on here. I absolutely love the cutters, and I use them for probably 90% of the hair barrettes that I created here. However, you can create really awesome shapes just using your scraper, your metal scraper tool. So after I cut this out, I'm just gonna shape it just using my cutter. So that's how I created these little ones that you see here, just rectangles. So all you're gonna do is just press into the clay and trim away the excess. Super easy. If you are a perfectionist and want to make sure those are totally square and nice 90-degree corners, you can actually take a piece of graph paper, cut it the size that you want as a template, place it on your clay, and then cut around it. It's really helpful. You can also, when you're cutting out shapes, it's another way to use, create a shape that's not available in a cutter, is I've cut a piece of paper, or printed out a piece of paper with a design on it, cut out a template, placed it on my clay, and then I've used just a regular old craft knife, which is also, this is a Fisker's one that's available at Michael's. You can use that to cut out your clay as well on top of your, or excuse me, around your template. So there's a lot of possibilities with this clay before you bake it, after you bake it as well. But I'm just gonna go ahead and eye it for now.
While you do that, would you be able to let
Yep.
us know what pin you used for the pink barrettes you have there?
Yes, this one? Is this the one you're referring to, wondering about?
I believe so. That one and the one that you have in your little jewelry basket there.
Oh, right here.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks. So this one right here is made from, it's the same color that we used here. I made this one from the white, 3 segments of white and 2 of watermelon. So basically making a light corally pink here. And then this one is kind of a darker magenta. I used the berry color which is a little more fuchsia. So I wanted to make it a little more pink. So I actually combined it with a tiny bit of the rust color. And if you're just starting out and wondering what colors to get, I really love the rust color because it's kind of like a saddle brown color, like a chestnut color. And if you're looking for creating pieces that are looking like true, just stained leather, not colored, dyed leather, this one is really fun to get started with. And there also is more of a chocolate brown and just a deep black color that are really nice as well, that really do look like leather. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out and show you guys using my scraper. And now I have this nice shape. I would just place this on my baking sheet over here and go ahead and bake it. If it doesn't come out exactly, if I notice like, oh, well, it's a little wonky in the corner, after it's baked, you can just use your scissors and trim it right up. And then use the wet sandpaper to just smooth out those edges and get a really nice professional looking piece. When I'm making hair clips, and we're going to kind of jump into that, I like to take my scraps or even just bake a rectangle like this in whatever color I'm working with and cut out strips that are about the width, a little bit larger than the width and the length of the metal finding that I'm going to use to create a base. And you can do this after with scissors, but I find it super easy to just do right as you're baking it. Just use your scraper tool and create these little lengths that you can then trim if you want. I have a few that I made with scraps here that I didn't even cut the edges before I baked it, but I just have these handy because as you're building barrettes, you'll notice that you may want a base to kind of work with if you're getting really complex and layering a lot of objects. I do find it easier to have this little thing as a foundation to work on and then glue the whole finished piece onto the barrette. So it's kind of just whichever way you prefer to work, but a good way is don't waste these little scraps. You can just trim them up and bake them. And as soon as this airplane passes, I'll share another little tip as well. Okay, so you may notice in a lot of stores and on Pinterest, some of the most popular type of hair barrettes right now are actually just rectangular shapes. I've seen them everywhere, made out of resin, acrylic, leather, all sorts of things. So I created a bunch of these, and I think they might be in my house right now because I've been wearing them so much, that are just rectangular shapes of clay. So this is a really easy way to create a ton of these. They make great stocking stuffers, but all I did was create these strips, rectangular strips right here. And it's a really fun way to create on-trend accessories in your favorite colors. So what I would do is then go ahead and bake these, and I'm gonna move these out of the way here so we can keep working over here. And then I would, once they were baked, I would do any sanding if needed or if wanted, and then go ahead and work into assembling. I want to show you guys one more technique that I absolutely love with this, that I think combines so well with the leather, is using gold leafing. So you may, if you've been crafting for a while, you may be familiar with gold leaf, or maybe it's a new material. And I'm gonna reach over here and grab the package to show you guys. FIMO makes gold leaf that is specific for using with their clay, and it can be used before it's baked or after. But I love doing it before baking the clay. It saves a step later, and I'll explain that. But it really creates an awesome texture and finish to the clay. So I'm gonna grab these things over here. And someone from the FIMO team can update me, but I believe it's available in gold, silver, and copper. I'm not sure, but maybe I have the yellow gold here because that's my favorite right now. So I'm gonna grab this clay that I rolled out already and show you guys. This is just the solid black clay that I rolled out and then added little gold leafing. So I'm going to show you guys how to add that technique while the clay is unbaked. So let me go ahead and I'm actually going to do it to these strips that we just made while we have it rolled out. So gold leafing is actually gold foil. It's really, really thin, and it's kind of fragile if you've never worked with it before. But like working with a lot of this clay, it's very forgiving, and I don't think you can mess it up because I think with the leather effect clay, it just looks beautiful. So it comes in full size little square sheets. I'll flip this over so you guys can see it. And it can be applied, like I said, before it's baked, which I'm going to show you now, or after it's baked. If you do it after it's baked, you do need to add a type of adhesive called sizing that is also available by FIMO. But I like to skip a step and do it before I bake the clay because I can really manipulate it, get it where I want it on the piece. And especially you can even do it before you use your cutters, like I could do right here, cut out this shape and really get exactly where I want it on there. The one thing, if you wanted to, for instance, like paint out a word or some like little flowers or little tiny detail, and you really wanted to have control of where the gold appears, then you would want to do it after it's baked. But if you just want some nice texture, I'm going to show you guys this one. I think this one is so fun. This is a really large barrette that I made using the teardrop cutter and alternating between just solid ivory pieces and ones with gold foil. So what I like to do is just grab a little piece, just tear it off of the foil, move the rest out of the way, and you just gently use your finger and press it into the clay. You don't need to push it. You don't want to squish what you're working with. It tears very easily, and you can position it. If you wanted the whole thing to be solid, it's a great way maybe to use up scraps or another color that you're working with. You can just make the whole thing metallic. You could totally do that by laying the large piece of foil over the entire piece of clay, unbaked clay. But I'm just gonna kind of do it at random here. And you guys can see I'm wearing this barrette. This one I made with the largest oval cutter, mixing to make this coral clay, which is the same color we just mixed here, and gold foil applied before I baked it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add that here. And it's a really fun technique. And what I love about it is that after you bake the clay, it is set in there. So you don't really have to press into it. You don't have to add a finish. It's gonna be on there once it's baked, and you'll see it's not coming off. So it's a neat way to add some texture and make your pieces really unique. And definitely, I know metallic stuff is also on trend now, so I think it's really fun to create things like that as well. So this is just layering it on top. And then I would just go ahead and just using my fingers to brush away the excess foil. And you could save that and use it on another piece. And bake as is. So I'll go ahead and kind of wrap that around here and show you guys. But if you wanted to create a little bit different look with foil, you can actually roll the clay or use the clay machine to manipulate the clay a little bit more and have it more blended into the clay and have these little like really subtle gold flecks in there, which I think is really fun as well. And to do that, I would just apply this on the clay as I did now, and then I would run it through the roller or the clay machine and just knead the clay a little bit. The more you work with it, the more it's going to break up the gold foil or whatever foil color you choose. And I'll roll this through so you guys can see. But one pass through and you'll see this really cool texture, this crackle texture appeared. So it's really endless what you can make with it, because you'll notice and kind of learn as you work with it. The more you work with it, the more you'll notice, oh, wait, okay, if I add the foil and do this, it's gonna look like this, and kind of get to know what each process will kind of outcome it will give you. But I just added a little bit more so you can really customize the look. What I would do then, and that's how I created this one right here, is I added the foil, I blended a little bit, and then I would just grab a cutter, and I'll show you guys that oval one over here. We'll just use a little smaller. And I would just cut it out. Grab the excess. So you could keep working with this. I left some scrap clay over here, a few colors that had gold foil, and I just blended them in with the clay, and I really liked the really subtle kind of sparkle it gave some of the pieces that I made. So for this one, I'm just gonna use 2 oval sizes to cut out the middle there. And you'll notice it kind of stuck there, but that's no problem because I can use my scraper tool, lift it up, and carefully punch that out. Okay, so here's a really fun piece that I just made, just using 2 oval cutters. So I would just smooth this out because I can see it's a little bit rough with my hands. Smooth that out, and then I would move that to my baking sheet and go ahead and bake it. When you have all your pieces ready to go, you want to bake them in a preheated oven or toaster oven at 130 degrees Celsius, or that's, I think it's 265. I always do it on Celsius on mine, 265 Fahrenheit. And if you're using a convection oven, if you have the ability to turn convection off, you want to do that because you want the heat, I believe you want the heat from the top and bottom on the oven as it's cooking. So do you guys have any questions before we get into the assembling section? I'm going to show you guys a few more techniques once it's baked. Yes, I believe there is one question. If Corey, if you might be able to read that, please.
Yeah, we have a great question about what are some of the other things that you like to create with this type of clay?
The FIMO Leather Effect, other than the hair Barrettes was the first project that I tried with it. But one of my favorite things is going to be jewelry. I love making earrings. As you can see, I made these with the daisy cutters and some foil. You can also, one of my friends, Kara, that taught a workshop as well, it's available on Michael's. She made pouches like clutch purses and glasses cases using the FIMO Leather Effect Clay, which blew my mind because I had no idea that clay could be used almost like a fabric, which is really awesome. I also have experimented with making leather looking bracelets. One thing that I'll show you guys in just a few minutes is one other unique property of the Leather Effect Clay is once it's baked, you can actually sew it with a sewing machine, which is so cool. One thing when you're using a sewing machine, and I'll talk about that, is, here's one I'll show you guys right here, a hair barrette that I made, that I did this little like trim just with a straight stitch on my sewing machine. If you are going to use the FIMO Leather Effect in your sewing machine, you want to make sure you're using an upholstery or a denim needle. That's a heavy duty sewing machine needle. So if you do any type of sewing, you'll notice that whatever machine or needle that came with your machine or that you traditionally use for like cotton fabrics or woven fabrics, you want to use something that's a little bit heavier just because this is a thicker material. So something like denim needle works perfectly, and that's what I used for this. So the possibilities are really endless because you could just roll out large sheets of the clay and then use it like you would a vinyl fabric or a cotton fabric or denim fabric or even just like a sheet of leather. So it's really neat what you can do with it. So time is going by so quick. So I'm gonna show you guys a little bit tips and tricks on assembling the finished hair barrettes and then show you guys a few more things that are really fun to do with it. So once you have your baked pieces, I have a ton of them here. Just slide this stuff over here. You can, this is the fun part, assembling them. You maybe created your pieces with something in mind, like these. I'll show you guys. Here's the daisy one, which my husband thought looked like eggs from a distance. These are just ones that I layered a circle and a daisy. If I wanted to go ahead and assemble these onto my barrette, I'm gonna show you guys. I'm gonna grab some scissors. I'm gonna use one of these scrap pieces to cut a little rectangular length. And then for adhesives, I've found that I like using gel super glue. Works really well. And the FIMO team can share some input on that as well. but I personally have liked using that I got at Michael's Gorilla Gel Glue. Has been really, I haven't had any issues with it coming off the metal, bonds really well from clay to clay and the clay to the metal. And I like to put a scrap piece of paper down. And I'm just gonna put a little bit of glue down. And again, something that's unique with the Leather Effect Clay is I don't have to worry about having the clay have a little bit of a bend or pre-baking the clay with the metal finding. But because it has its flexibility, it's gonna bend right away to the shape of my hair barrette. So I'm just gonna push this down, hold it for a few seconds. You wanna be careful to not get glue all over your fingers like I think I have every time I've done this. And then just like that, it's ready to go. You can layer the clay, and I'm gonna add one of these little flowers on here. You wanna just do a tiny bit of clay because it will spread as you put pressure on it. And then that one is ready to go. So I'm gonna kind of show you guys, walk you through some of the examples and show you a couple other things you can do with the clay after it's baked to create really unique pieces. And so I'm gonna show you guys, here's that gold leaf one that I showed you guys at the beginning. I created this one from these teardrop shapes that are in the teardrop cutter pack. But what I did is after I baked them, I realized, oh, I think they kind of look like teeth. So I'm gonna use my scissors and I just trimmed off the pointed edge to create that shape, just using my scissors. And then to get them all the same size, I just stacked them up to use the top one as a template and trimmed it. So it's really forgiving in that after you bake your piece, if you're not quite happy with it, you can grab a pair of scissors, go to town and transform the shape. And then if you want, you can go ahead and sand those edges just a little bit. So that one, I would just alternate the pieces back and forth to go ahead and create this finished one that I just glued directly onto this large barrette. But one thing that I want to show you guys that's really fun is you can add some really fun texture. I know this color is kind of hard to see here, but this one I used this tool from FIMO that has a little teeny tiny ball at the end. It looks like a tool that would be used for adding like doing nail art. But this is what I did is when the clay was wet, or excuse me, unbaked, I just used the tool to gently press into the clay. And that's what I did here as well to create a fun texture. This one I made polka dots, and I used the tool here to almost create a faux stitching look just in the clay. So this is a really fun way to add a little bit more texture and detail to your piece. And then I'm going to show you guys a couple examples that I used to sew. So here are these really fun pieces. This one I used the semicircle cutter, and then I just used my sewing machine in a contrasting color to sew around the perimeter of it, close to the edge. And then this one I use a straight stitch, but I just went back and forth in a zigzag, and I think it really created a fun piece here. And then this one could just be glued directly to the back of that. So it's really fun because especially in like the brown color or even the black, it really does look like a leather barrette, which is so cool. The last thing, the last few minutes, I want to show you guys one other technique that is so much fun is after you guys bake the clay, you can actually use a hole puncher or a leather punch, if you have one of those, to create holes in the material. So that's how I created this piece here. I just simply used the rectangular cutter, rolled out my clay, used the rectangular cutter to cut it out. And then I used the pencil to mark where I want to punch the holes. And I'm using just this cutter that, or excuse me, hole punch that I've had, gosh, this is probably 10 years old or more. This is an 1/8 of an inch hole punch to just punch the clay. And it is so cool that it creates a really nice clean hole. And there's so many things you can do with it. You can create a pattern like I did, or you can use it to create like little hole cutouts all around the edge of the shape. It's really endless. This is also the tool that I used to make these little hair clips with the little wood skewers. I just used the hole punch. I'll show you guys on this one, on either end. And this is a hole punch that I believe was from Michael's. It's from Fiskars. I believe a regular hole punch would probably work really well, but if you have a leather punch, that would give you a lot of possibilities because it has different diameters that you can punch into the material. So you can use the holes for adding a stick to make a little barrette like that, or make it decorative like this one. So I know we're running out of time. Are there any questions before we wrap up here?
Would you be able to let some of our fans know when your next class is?
Yes. So on Thursday, September 3rd, so in about 3 weeks, we're going to be doing another workshop, but the next workshop is going to be using the FIMO soft clay to create all types of fun earrings and jewelry. So if you're interested in learning how to use that clay and building on the techniques that we talked about, please join us. It'll be super fun, and I'm excited to do it.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Are there, yeah, thank you.
Fantastic.
Any other questions?
I think we're good to wrap up.
Okay, awesome. And if you guys have any other additional questions, I recommend jumping on the Staedtler North America Instagram account and sending them a message or a comment if you have any particular questions that we didn't cover here about leather effects, or you can send me a message as well at Sarah Hartz. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was so much fun.